Welcome to the South Asia Democratic Forum podcast, where we explore the complexities of conflict, justice, and memory across South Asia. I am Tapas Kanti Baul, and today's episode takes us into the deeply human experience of war, beyond geopolitics, and into the realities of captivity, survival, and return. We will be discussing the remarkable book War, Captivity and Return in Sri Lanka, an Emic View into the Life of Ajith, which offers a rare and intimate account of life during and after conflict, told through lived experience rather than official narratives. I am joined by my co host, Natasha Fernando, Junior Associate at SADF, whose work on memory, violence, and reconciliation brings important depth to today's conversation. We are honored to be joined by Ajith Boyagoda, whose personal journey of captivity during the Sri Lanka Civil War forms the heart of this powerful book. We are also joined by Kagusthan Ariaratnam, a former child soldier who was drawn into the LTTE's intelligence network and later forced to operate as an informant across multiple intelligence agencies. His memoir, Spy Tiger the 055, offers a rare insider account of war, espionage, and the personal cost of survival between conflicting identities. Together, this conversation brings into dialogue two deeply personal yet contrasting experiences of the same conflict, offering us a powerful lens to reflect on war, coercion, survival, and the long and complex search for justice and reconciliation. Stay with us. So, my first question is to Commodore Ajit that what inspired you to share your story in this book, and what do you hope readers take away from your experience?
I was instrumental in writing this my experience by one of my fellow senior colleague who was in the Navy. He said, Ajit, why don't you let the world knows but and how he's been in captivity? Some say the most ruthless terrorist organization, maybe in the world, they say, is LTTE. It's Liberation Tigers of Tamil. So it's a lived experience, and I thought, yes, before I leave this world, my experience with them and what I experienced through hardships and let the fellow human get to know how the life of being in captivity. Also, when I was in captivity, there were a lot of stories spreading around about my captivity and what took place in the conflict, truth of the happening. Because some were suggesting that with the connivance of LTT, in colloquial language, they say, I sold my ship. So, what really happened, I wanted to spell out, at least for the sake of my children, because from this end, I was treated as being in captivity with the enemy. My fellow countrymen considered me as a traitor. So if I didn't reveal the what real happened, then it's something I'm not doing on behalf of my family, at least my children, because my children were harassed in school because they were very small at that time. The youngest was just 2 years, the eldest was 7 years. They were treated very, I should say, like traitors' children. So, to clear all these doubts and misinterpretations, I thought let's spell out what really happened from the day one, next 8 years. So, I think that will suffice.
Thank you so much for your account, Commodore Boyagoda. So, when I decided that we should put you in this podcast along with Kagusthan Ariaratnam, who joined us for the previous podcast, it was basically because I thought these two stories should be worth told together, because I read this book first before I read your book, and some of the claims that were made in this book I actually had to verify through Kagustan. I had a chat with the person who wrote the book Spy Tiger Five Files, who was a journalist, Michael Brahmadatta Vilko, and it was Kagustan Ariaratnam who introduced me to this book. And he said, why don't you read this? And I made this many notes about the book, and I wrote 2 reviews. In this book, I found a lot of interesting things that I was able to corroborate. Facts that you mentioned and the facts that came out through Kagusthan Ariaratnam, things that we previously did not know about the LTTE. And one thing that I thought, which is very amazing, is lived experiences of survivors of conflict. So in Kagustan's case, he was a person who was forcibly recruited as a child soldier, then had to defect to the Directorate of Military Intelligence, and he came from that conflict. He escaped to Canada to live freely. And in your case, when I read this book, it actually made me cry, because it made me realize that there was a person who was a commander of the Navy, captured by the LTTE, spent 8 years as a prisoner of war on the other side of the conflict, and brought in all these amazing insights. But what I found very tragic is the disinformation and misinformation that was spread through newspapers, Sinhalese newspapers, about the conflict. The rumors that were spread about how the ship was captured, the SLNS Sagarvardhana, and how that affected your personal life and the life of your family and children. And when that was recounted in this book, and you finally got to have the justice when this was published and the truth came out long years after the conflict. I also think that when you published this book in 2016, the political climate in Sri Lanka was also much favorable to get this book out, because it was during the Sirisena Wickremesinghe government 2015 to 2017. Would you have any reflections about like the timeline of your book publication, and the kind of reception that you received for this book when you published in 2016?
Me and my co-author, Sunila Galapatti. At this point, I must say a big thank you to Sunila Galapatti, who made my story a living story. It's not a something you say that was. It's the real truth that was told to her. Wrote back. Basically, it took 5 years for Sunila and me to complete this book, to get the honest story out of me. She was really going all out. So I had to repeat everything over and over again, so that I will tell the same thing every time when I repeat. So it's not a made up story, basically. So the reception after publishing, or rather, before we published, both of us decided that we'll publish this book out of Sri Lankan soil. Because although you said it, the things are all right in Sri Lanka, but it's not really. But there can be chances of banning the book, because I have revealed some uh, points that no one would have come out with, especially with the Sri Lankan armed forces, where I say where the Tamils were treated sometimes inhumanly, and in a war situation, these things do happen. People, when an army walk through a village, many things can happen which the people may not like. But my belief was we are trained soldiers, unlike the counterparty. We are disciplined force, handle the situation in very humanly. Like we can't do unethical things, or basically killings or whatever it is. So such things were revealed in my book, and basically this is what I have said in this long watch is what I saw to my eyes. There is no hearsay in this book. All what I see and experienced only was written. So, in fact, I told Sunila, by writing this book, I don't want to be a hero among the people of South. And also, I don't want to be a ruthless person among the people of North. So what I say, write it exactly in the same manner, and which she did wonderfully. As if I am writing, she wrote on behalf of me. So these are things that will sometimes some will not like to hear. Something is said about bad about your own people. So we thought better we go outside and publish this, and that made us to go select the publisher, the Hearst publication in UK. And once it was published, the Sri Lankan book publishers got the right to bring down the book and sell it in Sri Lanka. And so actually we did that to escape the chances of getting blacklisted, because it has happened many a times in our soil. Not only books, the films are being banned. So that's all. That's it, Natasha.
Thank you so much, Commodore Boyagoda. So, one other thing that I noticed when I read the book was also that when you were initially captured in the first few months, there were people who came and interviewed you in the camps just to find out about the Sri Lankan Navy. But you reveal in the book that the things that you told these young cadets who were curious were simply things that even they could have researched and found through Jane's magazine, and just information about ships, about naval capability of the navy, things that they could have very easily found out even doing like a desk research. And it is during this time you found Kagusthan Ariaratnam. You discovered, you met him for the first time. And Kagustan writes about this in his book also, which was the first time that I came across this story of your captivity and about how you were treated as a prisoner of war. So I will let you speak for a few minutes about the things that you were interviewed on by the younger cadets of the LTTE. And then later on, I will pass on the opportunity. You can take over Kagustan, Murali, and you can explain the first time that you encountered Ajith Boyagoda. At that time, he was captain, your experiences with him.
Well, after I was fished out of water, I used that word. I don't like to say that I was captured. I was rescued, basically. I should say I was rescued by LTT and brought ashore. It's not a capture actually, because in the sea, in the blue ocean, you can't swim and get to an end, get ashore or meet anybody. It's an open sea. You go, you don't know where you are swimming or floating. So I would have definitely drowned myself if I was not picked up or fished out of water by our counter party. Or some would like to name them as the enemy. So for me to even today to talk with you all in this podcast was able and thankful to them, because I'm alive today after the ship getting lost and sinking. I didn't sink. I survived. So when I was brought ashore, of course they were overjoyed when I revealed myself, who I am, and because some suggest that I was captured knowing that I was the captain of the ship or the commanding officer of the ship, which is not true, because they wouldn't have identified me, and in that dark night I was not wearing any identification insignia. I was just wearing a t-shirt and a blue short. That's all. That's our sea rig. I was wearing epaulets, but my fellow seaman said, "Sir, don't wear these." He pulled it out. So when I was taken out of the boat they carried me from water, I said, "I'm so and so." Of course, they asked me whether I am injured. I said no. Then I told them that I am so and so. So that took them aback, because they got the big fish from the sea. So then, of course, what transpired after that is all written in the book, and anyone can read it through. So later, day after, I was driven to the Jaffna Peninsula. And for 6 months, I can remember, I think 6 to 8 months, I was kept, me and my colleague. who was also rescued in another in a different location from my ship. He is my shipmate. Were brought to Peninsula from Silavatura area where they brought me ashore. So later on in the house arrest, only he was like my younger son. He was like a son to me that time. He and three other women carders, three girls. All of them used to call me Appa because I'm a senior man, elderly man. So I should tell you all that they never harassed me or tortured me, trying to interrogate me or interview me or any anybody can name it anyway. Interrogation or interview or contact or basically questioning. And I told them, in fact, I told Larry that I'm telling what I know. I can't say anything that I don't know. I have not seen. I was only a seagoing officer, so I was not exposed to naval secrets or naval operational secrets or whatever it is at that time because I was just a seagoing officer. So I told so when they asked me about the ship, I said, as you mentioned, if you open up a Jane fighting ship, you can spot Sagravardhana and read about it. The specifications are laid down in this ship, in this book. Also, even the other areas where they were questioning me, I told them I have been in those areas few years ago. When at the time of questioning, a couple of years ago, I had been serving in those areas. So, but I can say, but I was seen at that time. So it may be different to that if you go now. So don't take me as a liar if I didn't say exactly what it is now. So that's how it went on. And later on, I helped them to translate a seamanship manual, which is that's the book about all naval seamanship manual from English to Tamil through many languages. I read it, I tell Sinhala to another garden, and he translated it to Tamil. And these Ariratnam and those three girls were noted down. So that was one of the tasks they gave me at that time when I was under their detention. I hope you got what you wanted to know about them, Natasha.
No, no, simply I was just curious about like your first encounter with Oppilan. He was called Oppilan at that time,
Yes.
and that was all. Because when I used to work at the Defense Ministry, and I've met people who were Commodore, Captain, and most of the time, even people with high-ranking officers who are seagoing officers, they do not have access to like military secrets, naval procurement, and things like that. They simply have knowledge from the training that they've received, but never these national level secrets. So it's not like you could have given the LTT any significant information for them to that would have made you a traitor in the eyes of the Sri Lankan military personnel. So that I can say with responsibility. Let me also ask Augustan the same question, like about when you first encountered Captain Boyagoda. What was your initial experience?
First of all, let me apologize on the behalf of my countrymen. When I say countrymen, I include the Tamils and Sinhalese and the whole society as a whole, which failed us for the last 30 years because of collective amnesia, I call it. Because I say this because it is all politics and war. They say war is extended hand of politics. We are the first victim is the truth. Truth is the first victim in any war. And Commander Boyagoda and myself, we were lucky to be alive today to tell the tale. I would also like to say under what circumstances I met Commander Boyagoda. Commander Boyagoda was arrested or captured or rescued, whatever word you want to use it, you can use it. but he was a captive by a terrorist organization. Now, let me be blunt. Tamil Tigers is a terrorist organization, and they are not freedom fighters. They target civilians. They kill, massacred Muslims and Sinhalese villages, and they bombed the central banks. They bombed civilian areas. They assassinated two world presidents. They had an army, navy, rudimentary air force. They are one of the most ruthless terrorist organization in the world. And I am part of the reason why Tamil Tigers were defeated. So I'm proud about that role. And I will proudly say that as a Sri Lankan, I'm proud of being a person who contributed to the annihilation of the terrorist organization in my country. Secondly, like Dr. Diane Jayatillaka put it very well, Prabhaharan is like a Michael Corleone in The Godfather. He analogically compared Michael Corleone to Prabhaharan in The Godfather. Al Pacino acted that role of Michael Corleone. He assassinates everybody who is against him. Be it is Pramadasa or Ranasinghe Pramadasa or Rajiv Gandhi or Lalita Tirumudali or Ranjan Vijayaratna or President Kumaratunga or Abner Clancy Fernando or anybody who is on his way, we eliminate. So this is why Dr. Dayan Jayatlaga said that the Prabharan's way of thinking, the mindset and the ideology of the LTTE is that eliminate everybody who is against on our path. They started killing Chetty, the founder of the LTTE. Prabharan killed Chetty because he accused that he stole money and he was giving secret information to the police. That was the first assassination. Then Alfred Thurayappa, and then Tamil students who were protesting, they were assassinated. And then the 1983 July pogrom, where 13 soldiers were killed. That is a military target, that I agree, and that went into blow up into a civil war in my country. And after that, Prabharan continued to assassinate one by one, starting from Ranjan Vijayaratna, Lalita Mudali, and Clancy Fernando. There are so many victims until Brigadier Janaha Pereira in Anuradhapura in 2009 or 8. During the high peak of war, he was a retired officer at that time. He's a politician, Brigadier Janaha Pereira, a gentleman in the army. So LTT one by one assassinating Tamils and Sinhalese alike, like a generation of intellectuals were wiped out. And I was ashamed to say that whether I like it or not, I had to be part of that campaign. Put a small narrative of my involvement. I was a high school student. I was studying advanced level mathematics when I was kidnapped by the SALT, Students Organization of Liberation Tigers, and taken to the Elephant Pass army camp raid. At that time, there was a shooting and they put us in underground bunker and they forcibly recruited us. Within 1 week, 19 students straight out of school and went into the Sri Lankan LTT's military wing. So I was against my will. I had to do it. If I say no, I cannot live because the LTT is controlled area. They control a de facto government where everybody had to listen to them. There are so many examples. You can research that how many Tamil civilians were assassinated by LTT in Jaffna when they were controlling Jaffna. So if they kill their own people, imagine a Sri Lankan commander of the vessel, how he would have been treated if he said no. Even to teach admiralship book or to tell us what is on the Jane's fighting naval ship, that he has no choice. That I sympathize with him. That's why we call him Appa, because I know that I was working against my will with the LTT and he was just doing his job as a father, as a son, as a citizen, as a commander of the captain of the ship. He was just doing his job, and we attacked his ship, and as he explained right now, that he was fished out. It doesn't matter how he was fished out or how we attack. That technical intelligence I don't want to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the humane aspect of Commander Boyagoda. I will say this to today, reveal this, because I was allowed to go home while I was studying with. I'm not saying I'm going to interview him or interrogate him. I was studying. I was studying as a student from Commander Boyagoda about the admiral ship and Sri Lankan Navy peck of order and stuff like that. So everything, all the calendar to the diaries to open source intelligence were gathered. We were just corroborating with them, and he was teaching us like students. So I went and met my father and said that LTT kept this commander of the ship, and my father, who used to work as an engineer in Colombo Harbor, said that, before you were born, we lived as a brothers and sisters. Sinhalese are half Tamil, Tamils are half Sinhalese. We lived as a brothers and sisters, and these LTT buggers came and robbed the banks and made us enemies. We had to reform our country, reform our politics, reform our thinking. The digital amnesia, or the collective amnesia, is what that means is that deliberately forgetting about what took place in our country, from July pogrom to Easter Sunday bombing. We are forgetting what happened to us. Unless we wake up and smell the roses, we will never be going forward in world affairs. So what happened to Commander Boyagoda and to me was a tragedy. I don't want to talk about my captivity. That's in the book. You can read it. And today I want to just say apologize on behalf of entire Sri Lankan citizens that this gentleman, a leader, an officer who's in charge of a ship, is not a traitor. He's just a survivor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Murali, for that moving speech that you just gave us. It actually helped shed light on the situation because we are looking back at events that happened retrospectively. And to current times, this discussion is very relevant, and particularly for people like me who are doing research, the younger generation, who are trying to learn about the conflict and bring in different perspectives, people who are engaged in critical terrorism studies. We are trying to understand the Sri Lankan conflict through lived experiences. So that is my role as a research. And when I read these two books, it was very illuminating for me. And I thought I have to meet these people in person and ask them to tell me their story. I mean, of course, it is like a retelling of a story that you've already told someone, already published. But it is still important for me to find and capture other nuances that other people haven't captured uh, about the Sri Lankan civil conflict. I thank you both for coming to this podcast and having this discussion with us. But I have some more questions because I don't want to abruptly end this podcast. One of the important things that I found in this book was during the 2002 the ceasefire and peace talks, there was the prisoner swap, which is a very important milestone, a very important event in the life of Captain Boyagoda, because it was negotiated by different parties. There were different government entities, non governmental organizations like the International Red Cross and other countries that were part of the peace process. And the prisoner swap that took place at the time, it was Captain Ajith Boyagoda for Jesumi Fernando, which I thought is something that I like to learn a bit more about. I mean, if I can give the opportunity for Commodore Boyagoda to say something about it first, and then maybe if Murali has some insights into why Kennedy for Captain Boyagoda at the time, what could have been behind the thought processes of the LTTE, that would also be useful.
Uh, yes, Natasha. LTT demanded Kennedy, who was captured in Palale when he posed the attack on Palale airport. So they were demanding release of Kennedy for me, and with me there were 6 more soldiers who were in captivity at that time. Initially, there were 24 of us, 2 Navy, and rest from the Army. But on and off, they released the captives and expecting something return from the Sri Lankan government. It's a kind of bargaining. Earlier, there were many earlier instances where they were trying to serve us and get some of their cadres who were in government, Sri Lankan government custody. But the governments at that time didn't made any effort to do that. So in 2002, when the ceasefire agreement was signed, when Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe was the Prime Minister and General Balagalla was the Army Commander, and Attorney General was Kanakasabe. I think they were mainly instrumental in to get these prisoner swap done. And that was to strengthen the ceasefire agreement. It was like to bring two warring parties to one table, and as a goodwill gesture, they want to exchange some gifts. So it is human gifts that they wanted to exchange to strengthen the peace accord. So first instance, when they tried to get Kennedy, but that failed because of some legal implications. Couldn't get the court order for his release. But later on, maybe after a year or so, managed to do that because there were no evidence, much evidence, lack of evidence maybe to keep Kennedy anymore. If I was not released or Kennedy was not released, maybe the other 6 soldiers may not be able to come out. So all in all, this happened, and at that time we were in Pudukkottai, in what is it called, the close to Pudukkottai. There was the jail camp where the prisoners were housed. The cadre, the Newton was the person in charge of that jail base, and we were moving so closely, I should say. He was basically tears came to his eyes when we were departing. It's like although we were fighting whatever the reasons in two different ideologies or enemies, but the fact that we all are human was established over that period. So it was so saddening to part with them at that time, and tears came to Newton's eyes when we were saying goodbye at the last departing moment. But of course, later on, when the tsunami hit the Sri Lanka, I was retired from the Navy at that time, and I was working for a private company, corporate, and collected some relief items, and we were ready to donate those relief items for the people who were affected by tsunami. So nobody was thinking of moving to north and east because that time it was under the Liverpool government under the rule of LTTE. So my chairman asked me whether you could volunteer to go. I said yes, why not? We are taking relief items. We are not taking war materials or something like that. Relief items for civilians who were affected by by a disaster, natural disaster. So I brought uh, few lorry loads of relief items to one district. Of course, as a rule, can't go and distribute the way we want because that area was controlled by the LTT. So we had to meet the LTT political wing cadres and hand over the items to them so that they, along with us, distributed the items to the government agents. So that was something which, although we were fighting or warring fractions, that human aspect was maintained so that someday we could live together the way we were living in many years ago. So the same way I maintained the same standards with Ari also. We were like brothers or father and son at that time, although we were in two different parties. So I must thank Ari also at this moment, giving letting out the true account of my way under their captivity. Maybe I should say how I behaved or I maintained the standards of human standards, I should say. So thank you, Ari, and thank you, Natasha and Tapas, for arranging this podcast recording. Although many people have read my encounter, but this will enlighten certain areas. Book doesn't say, because you can't write everything in a book. Thank you.
Kagustan, do you have any observations about the prisoner swap in 2002? Of course, you were in Canada at that time. You escaped the conflict in 1996 and came here. But do you have any observations about why Kennedy for Captain Boyagoda at that time? Maybe in the perspective of the LTTE.
Okay. I just wanted to say that LTT, as a terrorist organization, they don't want their suicide bombers to be kept by the government and let other suicide being carders down. TT highly value their suicide bombers. Kennedy was a suicide bomber and he was the captain of the squad that was attacking the Palali Air Base. And I know that because I trained them in technical intelligence, the same squad, how to target the airplanes, how to target the fuselage, how to target the tail, how to target the petrol tanks, the wings, standing position, leaning position, lying position, so that, for an example, if it is a Shyama Shetty parked on the runway, they had to stand up and fire the RPG so that the Shyama Shetty will be destroyed. And if it is a helicopter, they had to put a leaning position and fire the low anti-tank, light anti-tank weapons. So I trained them in technical intelligence. Captain Major Kennedy was supposed to be the head of that squad, and he was arrested by the Sri Lankan government because he stepped into a booby trap or something, and he didn't eat the cyanide pill he had, and because of that his rank was demoted. If he had died as a martyr, he would have been offered lieutenant colonel or colonel rank posthumously. But LTT wanted to show the other rest of the suicide bombers that we value you. If enemy captures you, we will get you back. And they wanted to show, it's like sending a message to the rest of the cadres that high value suicide bomber isn't under the captivity. It's a symbolism rather than any value in my opinion, because the according to Prabhakaran and Patuaman, the suicide bombers will bring Tamil Elam in 10 years instead of 100 years fighting. That is the ethno-nationalist ideology. The motivation is not a religious cult or extreme Islamic ideology, jihad and kind of ideology. This is an ideology of separatism where Prabharan speaks in front of the suicide cadres that if we are fighting in a conventional manner, it will take 100 years for us to achieve Stamilila. If we attack by suicide bombers, it will take 10 years, we will achieve the same goal. So they wanted to high up the morale of the rest of the suicide bombers, and that is why Kennedy was transferred as a POW, wanted to exchange instead of Command Boyagoda. And at that time, they are the top high-level counterparts. But if I may say, like Commander Boyagoda was a high-ranking officer in custody, and Kennedy was a high-ranking officer in the army custody. So they exchanged them.
Thank you so much for your observations and for joining this podcast today, because through this podcast, we were able to capture some nuances that were not captured in the books and to tell some other aspects of your life accounts and lived experiences to the audience, because there are a lot of other narratives also which is very hard to document and capture, especially the role of the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, who were, were intermediaries throughout this conflict up until the negotiations in 2002. The way that they tried to bring a humanitarian role into the conflict, which is not even studied so far. And when I try to find the photographs of Mr. Boyagoda back in the day when it was published through the LTT media. I came into like a lot of difficulties, and I only found that one photo from the internet forum and the Tamil language newspapers which were preserved by the Noolaham Foundation. So it was very illuminating for me, this journey and having this conversation with you. So I'm going to leave it to Tapas Kanti Baul to see if he has any questions that he has to ask or any final observations before we wrap up this podcast. But I have more other questions which of course we will discuss offline.
Thank you very much, Natasha. I don't have any questions. I will just wrap up today's podcast because the whole discussion was quite illuminating for me. So I thank you, Kagustan, and thank you, Commodore Ajit, for sharing your stories with such honesty and courage. Today's conversation has brought together two deeply personal perspectives from the Sri Lankan civil conflict. Stories that, while different in experience, reveal a shared truth that war leaves lasting scars on all who are touched by it. In many ways, we have presented two sides of the same conflict between the Sri Lankan forces and the LTT, but also something more important, two human journeys shaped by forces beyond individual control. Both of our guests, in their own ways, are victims of circumstances, caught in systems of violence, coercion, and survival. Their stories remind us that conflict is never just about sides, it is about people, choices imposed under pressure, and the long struggle to rebuild lives afterward. I would like to thank my co host, Natasha Fernando, for her insights and contributions to this discussion. This is Tapas Kanti Baul signing off from South Asia Democratic Forum podcast. Thank you for listening and stay with us as we continue to explore the stories that shape our understanding of justice, peace, and humanity in South Asia. Thank you.